Continuing with the books on World War II special operations, we come to one of the most fascinating books, which covers an area that no other book has covered, and it's this book, Counterfeit Spies by Nigel West. And we've previously reviewed a book by Nigel West, who is an authority on the intelligence services, and he has written many books and has excellent sources. Now, after World War II, there was a flood of books written by people who had served in various secret organizations, and there were genuine books and biographies of some of the agents. For example, the story of Odette was published, and the story of Violet Szabo, Carve Her Name with Pride, the story of Yo Thomas, the White Rabbit. They were all published, and they really hit the public imagination. Now, the British are obsessed with secrecy, and even after the war there was still a lot of secrecy about what had happened during the war, and there was a couple of really big secrets that were kept for a long time, such as the Ultra, the code breaking, because it was an ongoing operation. But as regards SOE and the activities of the agents, the secrecy was an opportunity for people to tell false stories. Now, some of these weren't just exaggerations, they were outrageous whoppers. And even some of the genuine memoirs had mistakes in it. You know, I've harped on about Knights of the Floating Silk with the description of Fairbairn being incorrect, and so on, even though it was written by a genuine agent. So there were details that were wrong. Even Maurice Buckmaster, who was head of F section of SOE, operating into France, he wrote a book, They Served Alone, and there's inaccuracies in that, and he's the guy who should know. Anyway, the interesting thing about Counterfeit Spies is what Nigel West does is he does a synopsis of what a particular book claims without comment, and then he does a forensic analysis of where the lies, the omissions, the mistakes are in the book, as if it was a serious biography. So it's very interesting. You get this two sides. You get the fantasy, and then you get it deconstructed completely. So, for example, you know, there's because of the secrecy around SOE and everything, quite often names were changed. So in the counterfeit stories, you know, they were always recruited by Major so-and-so or Colonel so-and-so, and you know, the reality was that the SOE did use cover names for the recruiters, so at first you wouldn't know who you recruited. But then in the bogus stories, they get everything wrong, you know, where the headquarters was, the training pipeline and so on. It's all wrong. A big mistake that they make is parachuting from Lysanders. Now, the Lysanders were used by the special duty squadrons to insert agents into occupied countries. It was an aircraft that could land on unprepared fields and fly low and slow, and a couple of agents, sometimes well in excess of the recommended load, could be uplifted from a field in France. but you couldn't parachute from a Lysander. So many of these stories, right away, you know there's something wrong. And when you consider what the SOE actually did, you know, the courier lines, communications and so on, advising the French, that the real agents did, it makes the claims of some of these stories even more outrageous, such as impersonating a high-level Gestapo officer or a high-level Wehrmacht officer for an extended period of time, and even fooling his mistress, you know, having plastic surgery to resemble some official, massive acts of espionage, penetration German high command, resisting the most severe and brutal torture, assassinating double agents all over Europe, escaping in bizarre ways. These books feature all of this. One of the stories featured by Lady Clark is based on the idea that when she's operating in France, she was about to cross a road and she looked to the right, anticipating traffic coming from that direction as you would from England, and an alert counterintelligence security interrogated by the Germans before being released and returning to her duties. The fact of the matter is, Lady Clark, who was a prominent member of society, never left the UK during World War II. So Nigel West has gone into all these stories, and he's got the records of the special duties squadrons, and you know he can absolutely state that no flights occurred on a particular period that the book refers to, and so some of the books they talk about a whole span of time. And another thing that Nigel West does is do a timeline analysis and demonstrate that some of the episodes don't add up, because the person would have had to have been in two places at once, or it was referring to wartime operations that weren't happening at that time. One of the really significant sections, because it concerns a genuine character, was the story of Bill Stevenson, Sir William Stevenson, who ran British security coordination in New York, which did a great job. After the war, he commissioned Dick Ellis, who had been a member of SIS, to write his biography, and he was given access to the papers of BSC, and he wrote a straightforward biography of what that organisation did and what the different people in it did. Unfortunately, sometime later, Ellis was revealed as having been a double agent. He had been selling information to the Nazis, so he was disgraced. Then another well-known writer, H. Montgomery Hyde, had a second crack at a biography, and he wrote The Quiet Canadian, which was fairly straightforward, but in it he revealed the identity of Sir Stuart Mingus, who had run SIS during the war. And British secrecy, again, this caused an outrage. Questions were asked in Parliament, and what it did was raise the profile of the book and make public interest in the book very high. And then for some bizarre reason, another Canadian whose name was also William Stevenson but spelt differently, wrote the third biography, which was called A Man Called Intrepid. And this is the first part of the myth that Sir William's code name was Intrepid. It wasn't. It was the telegraphic address of British Security Coordination, and that he'd been given this code name personally by Churchill. And that there's quite a lot of similar nonsense in the book. Things like the attack on Operation Anthropoid, the sending of agents into Czechoslovakia to assassinate Heydrich, supposedly planned, and the training was carried out at Camp X under the direction of Sir William. Completely wrong. It was all done in the UK. Stuff about the ultra secret, the Enigma traffic being routed through there. The Dieppe raid was planned there. All sorts of absolute nonsense. Yeah, so it's all in this book. It's fascinating read. He actually went on to write a similar book about Cold War counterfeit spies, which we will no doubt review at some stage. But as I said, it's a unique book about a very fascinating and rather a strange phenomenon of all these phony memoirs. It's utterly fascinating, and it can be read alongside the genuine material.